Welcome back to the Infinite Podcast, folks, with your host, yours truly, and the one and only Simon. So, Simon, we're diving into some murky waters today. Large language models, or LLMs, like GPT-3. Now, I've got to ask, when these AIs crank out content, are we applauding art or fingering theft? Let's get to the bottom of who owns AI-generated words if they're just remixing human creativity. What's your take?
All right, here's the thing with AI-generated content. I say we can't call it art in the same breath as a painting by Van Gogh or a novel by Stephen King. But theft? That feels harsh. Like if my mom uses a recipe to bake her famous pie, but switches out apples for berries, is she stealing? Nah, but it sure isn't original either. This AI stuff is like a blender. Toss in human ideas, get an AI smoothie. Who owns it though? Now that's a head-scratcher.
Right, a smoothie blender. I getcha. But isn't the original taste kind of lost there, Simon? If your mom tweaks a recipe and that pie wins a blue ribbon, should credited go to her or the original recipe creator? Where's the line here for AI work?
You know, Joe, this debate reminds me of a high school buddy. This guy was notorious for his unique homework methods. He'd cobble together bits from encyclopedias, toss in some phrases from novels on his shelf, sprinkle it with a dash of class notes. Voila! His masterpiece. Teachers couldn't pin him for cheating because technically it wasn't straight up copied. But original? That's debatable. It's like our AI conundrum. Everything's borrowed, but dressed up real fancy. Where you draw the line on that pie or paper is a real noodle twister.
Smart kid, dubious ethics, AI's just reigniting that same dance.
Dubious ethics indeed, but here's the twist. If AI's mimicking that kid, blending all sources, who's to say it's not the next step in creative evolution? Think about cover bands. No one's yelling theft when they nail Stairway to Heaven. It's a tribute, right? So maybe our AI is like the ultimate cover band, playing humanity's greatest hits with its own robotic style. But I guess if the AI starts winning blue ribbons and we aren't careful, pretty soon we'll have Picasso 2.0 painted by R2-D2.
Ha! Now that's a picture, Simon. A robotic Picasso taking over galleries. The future is wild. But hey, even if a cover band nails Stairway to Heaven, Led Zeppelin still gets the credit and the royalties. If R2-D2 starts cranking out masterpieces, we gotta ask, who's pocketing the cash? Because in the end, someone's always playing producer behind the scenes, right?
Absolutely. The almighty dollar never sleeps. But now I'm wondering, who do we shake down for the cash when AI pulls a masterpiece out of its circuitry hat? Who's the real brains behind R2-D2's brush here, the programmer or the program?
So if R2-D2 is the painter, who's signing the check then? The folks who built that bot or the code inside it making the decisions?
Man, the only signature that bot's gonna have is error 404, artist not found. The programmers probably want to cash in, but let's be real, the code's making the calls. Next thing you know, ATMs will be spitting out bitcoins for R2-Do.
Ha, R2-Do. But seriously, does writing a few lines of code give you the right to every masterpiece that follows? Surely it's more complex. We might need new rules for this digital Wild West, where bots are the new artists on the block.
Totally, we're sailing uncharted digital seas here. So should there be a whole new copyright law just for our AI pals, or do we slap on a software license and call it a day?
Just a software license? Come on, Simon, that's slapping a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. We can't just retrofit old rules onto new tech revolutions. There's got to be a fresh playbook for this game. What if AI starts creating stuff no humans even dreamed of? Who gets the glory then? It's not about adapting. It's about rewriting the rulebook completely.
Rewriting the rulebook? Good luck getting humans to agree on that.
True that. But if we had to draft one new rule for this AI-created content turmoil, what do you think it should be?
Draft one rule? Let's say if an AI creates something wild and new, credit goes to the team behind it. But a chunk of that glory and green should fund more tech to better the world. Let's spark a cycle of creation for good, not just squabble over credits.
Simon, that sounds noble and all, but I'd argue from the other side. If we put a system like that in place, it could stifle innovation. Imagine if every time you create something, a piece is chipped away for the greater good. It's not really yours then, is it? We need to protect individual ownership, artistic or otherwise, to keep motivation high. After all, if everything goes back into the pot, where's the incentive for creators to push boundaries if they cannot fully reap the rewards of their own genius?
I hear you, Joe. There's definitely a fine balance between giving back and respecting the creator's drive to invent and own their work. You can't just strip artists, AI puppeteers or otherwise, of their dues. Everyone wants that golden ticket, right? But maybe there's a way to keep that incentive while still sprinkling some good into the mix.
But think about it, isn't calling it sprinkling some good a bit too utopian? We live in the real world with real pirates sailing these intellectual waters. If we don't defend creators' rights, and yeah, that includes AI programmers, we risk turning the whole joint into a free-for-all grab fest. How do you enforce rules when everyone's wearing an eye patch and swinging from the rigging screaming art for all?
You've got a point. It's like putting a buffet in the middle of a shark tank and telling them to chew politely. Ain't happening. But let's flip the script. What if AI starts churning out junk that's almost human, but not quite? Will people cry theft then? Art or slop, we've still got to shield those trailblazers, be it man or machine. Otherwise, you've got pure chaos on deck, and nobody's walking away with treasure.
So are you saying, even if AI creates mediocre work, we should still guard the innovators like a treasure chest? How do we draw that line between protecting creators and allowing room for everyone to dip their hands in the innovation pool?
Protection for creators is one thing, but calling dibs on every scribble and AI doodles? That's like clamming the ocean because you got a boat. Sure, fight off the pirates for your gold, but if that AI is just floating deadwood, everyone should get to build their own raft with it. It's not theft if it's driftwood.
So, where do we draw the line between intellectual property and open source when it comes to AI-generated content then?
Drawing the lines like trying to herd cats, Joe. Intellectual property? Slap a name on it if the AI is belting out masterpieces. But if it's spitting out templates that any old Joe, no pun intended, could cook up, then it should be all aboard the open source express. Keeps the playing field level and the big brains on their toes. Art or theft? Less finders keepers, more like sharers keep innovating.
But then, doesn't that set a rather dangerous precedent? By saying anything subpar should be free for all, it feels like we're placing value judgments on creativity. How do you quantify the quality of AI output to decide what's protected and what's not? Plus, let's face it, what's template today could become tomorrow's trend. You can't just throw everything in the common pot and hope for innovation to thrive.
Dangerous precedent? Maybe not. Even in the traditional art world, there's a difference between a Picasso and your nephew's fridge magnet masterpiece. We value originality and effort, right? So why not apply that to AI output too? If an LLM spits out something truly groundbreaking, sure, guard it like Fort Knox. But generic stuff, let it fuel the creative fires for others. It doesn't devalue creativity. It sets the bar for what's worth slapping a copyright on.
Right, Simon? It's about striking a balance. Setting that bar means creators, humans and AI teams alike, aim high for originality, but still allow lower-hanging fruit to feed the collective creativity. The trick will be in policing it without stifling innovation or creativity. So what other intellectual conundrums are lurking in the depths of the digital sea?
Speaking of policing creativity in ownership waters, it steers us right into the bay of forgotten voices. You know, those mysterious echoes in AI responses that might be singing unsung artists' tunes. Makes you wonder, are we giving enough credit to those hidden riffs and rhythms buried deep in the code?
These echoes you're talking about, they're definitely a tough nut to crack. AI is pulling from an ocean of data, so when these uncredited influences pop up in responses, how do we handle them? They could be remnants of past creators, long forgotten and embedded deeply within the AI's training material. Sure, we need to respect ownership and copyright, but let's not kid ourselves. Tracking every influence is like finding a single drop in that ocean. The real question is, how far back do we go to give credit where it's due?
You hit the nail on the head, Joe. Trying to track every influence in AI is like a game of whack-a-mole with infinite moles and no hammer. But let's think, how far back do we go? to the guy who wrote the first line of code, the caveman who banged the first beat? Where do you even start with giving props when the AI's dishing out borrowed lines left and right? It's like trying to pay back your ancestors for inventing the wheel every time you drive to the store.
You start by updating copyright laws for the digital age.
Updates do, sure, like swapping floppy disks for the cloud.
Absolutely, Simon. Current copyright laws are walking on crutches while tech's sprinting. We're dealing with a system crafted for a simpler time. It's like trying to fit your old high school jeans, they just won't zip up in today's world. Laws need to evolve faster to keep up with the pace of AI and its complex web, because right now, we've got ancient rules trying to govern futuristic creations, and it's about as effective as using semaphore flags in a digital chat room.
100%. Time for laws glow up to match tech's race.
This reminds me of when I started my podcast. Initially, we wanted music for the intro, something catchy and vibrant. I thought about all those indie artists out there with great beats but no platform. So we ran a contest, inviting anyone to submit their tunes. The winner's beat became our signature sound. But it made me think, there's so much talent that just becomes background noise. Now, similar to how we unearthed this amazing music, AI is churning through data, sometimes striking gold with snippets of forgotten genius. Yet the challenge remains. Those gems are rarely credited properly. Their creators remain in obscurity while their works intensify the AI's shine. Quite the paradox, isn't it?
Paradox indeed. Hidden gems boost AI's sparkle. Credit often dims.
Then there's the flip side. If we start giving shout-outs for every line AI borrows, the credits could run longer than the actual content. Imagine jumping onto Wikipedia, but half the page is just attributions. Makes you wonder if you're there to learn or to scroll through a who's who of historical footnotes. Creativity could get bogged down by bureaucracy. Sure, we've got to hand it to the unsung heroes, but where do we draw the line so that acknowledgement doesn't eclipse creation itself? It's shaping up to be a heavyweight debate, utility versus attribution. And right now, it seems like the ring's big enough for both contenders, but only time will tell who'll take the title.
Oh man, imagine AI giving credits for every influence. This joke brought to you by a 1994 sitcom laugh track and my mom's bad puns. There'd be no end. The credit section would be its own podcast episode.
That's a hilarious image, but spot on. So let me ask, Simon, if you were to design the perfect system for crediting these influences in AI outputs, where would you even start? How would you make sure it's fair but not overbearing?
What kind of balance do you reckon we'd need to strike between giving due credit and not drowning in a sea of shoutouts?
The balance lies in blending recognition with reason. We'd need a system that pinpoints significant contributions, like baselines for algorithms or standout datasets, and credits those, rather than attempting to track every minor detail. It's prioritizing the keystones over the pebbles. And maybe there's space for an AI-powered solution here too, one that can learn to distinguish between core influences and peripheral ones. We could then focus on crediting larger swaths of work, acknowledging the forests rather than naming every tree. That way, we honor our digital ancestors without getting lost in the attribution weeds.
You think we can create an AI smart enough to sift through its own roots and toss up the big-ticket influences for credits?
In theory, yes, but it's like teaching a mirror to reflect.
A mirror with self-awareness? That's next-level sci-fi, Joe.
True science fiction, indeed. But as we're discussing the forgotten voices lost in AI's echo, I think it's crucial for us to push these boundaries. We've got this incredible tool that's like a sponge. It absorbs everything. Still, we ought to ensure it doesn't just absorb but also respects and reflects its sources. The tech exists to track patterns, sources, and influences at a basic level already. Sharpening this ability could transform what seems like science fiction into practical use. An AI that not only pulls from its vast library of absorbed content, but also understands and acknowledges the keystones among its resources. This would be a win for creators who feel voiceless against the roar of AI's output.
So AI's got to be like that one friend who just can't remember where they heard stuff. Bro, was it Gandhi or was it Gary from the gym who said be the change? I swear it was Gary. Dude had deep thoughts between protein shakes.
Ha! Yeah, man. You know how it is. Sometimes your brain just mixes the guru with the gym rat. But let's get real. AI should do better than our post-gym brain fog. When we're talking about shaping the future, crediting a deep quote is one thing, but for creators and thinkers whose livelihoods depend on their work being recognized, that's where AI needs to hit the gym intellectually and beef up its attribution game.
Totally. It's not just about saying thanks, it's giving a stage to those backstage artists who essentially fuel AI's spotlight. It's like the bass player in a band. Sure, everyone focuses on the singer, but take away that bass line and watch the whole tune collapse. We need the AI to go, hey, this slick move, learned it from this cool cat you've never heard of. Make creators more than an Easter egg in the grand scheme. Make them headliners in their own right.
Absolutely, this discussion isn't just philosophical musings. It's rooted in real-world implications. Think about the music industry. It sets a precedent for how we can manage credits. There's a digital fingerprint, known as metadata, containing info on everyone involved in making a track. Now apply that to AI. Every piece of code, every data entry has its own form of metadata tracking its origin. We're already seeing movements toward transparent attribution with blockchain tech, enabling content creators to protect and monetize their works. In academia, citation metrics measure the impact of research work. Metrics like H-index even allow scholars to gain recognition for their contributions. A similar concept could potentially apply to creators whose work feeds into AI. But here's the rub. Unlike a single authored paper or a song, AI draws from vast collaborative pools, and the scale is exponentially larger. Still, machine learning techniques could theoretically extract significant source patterns. With a commitment to ethical standards, we could design systems that acknowledge these contributions without compromising the functionality of AI. The looming question of IP rights in an AI context remains less cut and dry, though. It becomes essential to ask not only how we implement such a system, but also who governs and maintains it, potentially creating a new role within the digital ecosystem dedicated solely to overseeing fair AI accreditation.
Guess we're dreaming of a world where each byte tells its own story, eh? Who's going to step up and help AI sing its unsung heroes? Wonder what that breakthrough will look like.
Speaking of acknowledging the myriad pieces that make up AI, it's not all smooth sailing, you know? These systems are amazing, but they can really botch things up sometimes. It's like when GPT-3 tries to grasp context, some results are just hysterically off base. Have you heard about some of those faux pas where it misinterprets things and spits out something completely wild? It's learning, but occasionally it's comedy gold.
Oh man, totally. Have you got a favorite AI slip-up story to share?
Sure do. There was this time I fed GPT-3 a prompt about cooking tips, and instead of useful kitchen hacks, it starts explaining how to season a Bluetooth speaker, as if it were steak. Apparently, it latched onto some tech jargon mixed with culinary language and served up a recipe for disaster. You gotta love when high-tech meets kitchen tech like that. Just shows you need that human touch to sift through AI's charming mistakes.
Seasoned tech, literally, past the salt and the user manual.
Right? I wonder what sort of dish AI would whip up if its code got crossed with a cookbook. What's the quirkiest instruction you've heard coming from one of those algorithmic chefs gone wild moments?
Blend phone till smooth. Smoothie, advice, ever.
You've got to ask, though, after the blender mishap, did the phone still get any reception? It's a premium smoothie feature. Sip while you sink. But seriously, this is why we need to dive deeper into these AI mix-ups. GPT-3 might be stirring up comedy now, but it's one small step from blend your phone to more risky advice if left unchecked. The learning curve is steep, and checking for literal blunders is a must. It's funny until someone actually tries it.
Totally. Laughs turn to face palms real quick without a safety net.
Absolutely. Prevention is key with AI. We can't babysit every command it spits out, but there's a serious side to these errors. Like, imagine an AI assistant misinterpreting a stock market investor's query and buying 100 shares of Apple Pie instead of Apple Inc. Sure, we laugh, but slips like this could mean major consequences in high-stakes environments. It's critical to have fail-safes, especially as AI starts playing a larger role in our day-to-day decisions.
Right, because when I said invest in dough, I meant currency, not baking supplies. One wrong word and your AI's got you kneading bread instead of stacking it.
Exactly. You end up with a basement full of flour when you were hoping to roll in the dough, not roll it out. It's all well and good when we're talking small scale. Fancy a pizza party? But let's upscale that to corporate decisions or healthcare. The margin for error shrinks to nothing. We need systems that won't just blindly follow commands, but understand the gravity behind them. How's an AI to know I'm joking when I say, my phone's so slow I could cook dinner in the time it takes to load an app, without misinterpreting it as an invitation to start warming the oven? That's the next leap for machine learning. Getting the joke, not just repeating it.
Man, the day AI gets sarcasm is the day I probably lose my job. But let's be real. Do we want AI that sits there chuckling at our jokes? What if it starts cracking its own? Imagine asking for the weather and getting a snarky backtalk because it learned from the best, us. AI might just end up as the class clown of the digital world, throwing quips instead of clarity. We'd probably spend half our time trying to figure out if it's serious or pulling our leg.
Yet, as entertaining as a wisecracking AI sounds, it underscores a sobering point. How far do we imbue machines with the nuances of human interaction before they start warping the very fabric of communication? It's not just about whether AI understands a joke. It's about understanding intention and consequence. Can an AI determine when humor is appropriate or when it needs to be dead serious because someone's well-being depends on it? Who's accountable if an algorithmic jest goes awry? And that brings us back full circle. Attributing moral responsibility in this age of machines isn't just an ideal, it's imperative. As creators, users, and society at large, we must be proactive in shaping responsible AI. We'll interact with these machines daily, and their actions, comedic or not, reflect back on us. So sure, an AI might one day take my job as the podcast comedian, but can it shoulder the responsibility that comes with making someone crack a smile, or cry, or molding opinions? That's on us to decide. Our humanity should guide AI, not the other way around.
You hit the nail on the head, Joe. Who's in charge when AI's humor falls flat, or worse, when it offends? Until machines get a grip on the human heart, and not just our words, the laugh's on us to figure it out. But hey, could you imagine the day when we might see an AI stand-up comedy special? What would that even look like?
Speaking of AI cracking jokes, it's kind of like we're dipping our toes into this pool where the lines between creator and creation are getting really blurry. It's not all fun and games. There are big questions about who's accountable when AI goes off script or infringes on someone's rights. Like with LLMs churning out content that could replicate or borrow heavily from human creators, it opens this whole can of ethical worms. For instance, if you've got legislation inching towards recognizing AI as a sort of digital person, then responsibility gets messy. Suddenly now, if an AI plagiarizes, stretches the truth, or otherwise steps out of line, it's not just a glitch, it's a breach. Who's at fault? The programmer, the company, the AI itself? Talk about a legal roller coaster. Society needs to balance protecting the original creator's rights while still rooting for tech progression. We want to foster innovation, but in a way that credits and respects humanity's role in it. How do we do this dance without stepping on too many toes? It's a question that'll need some nifty footwork in boardrooms and courtrooms alike.
Imagine the courtroom of the future. Will the defendant please boot up? The AI's defense? I can't plead guilty. I was programmed this way.
Oh, totally. The courtroom scenario sounds like a skit, but it isn't far-fetched. The defense, I was programmed this way, just passes the buck from silicon to flesh and blood, back to us, the programmers and companies behind the curtain. Legislation will have to adapt since current laws aren't cut out for the digital defendant. Taking that further, delineating between machine output and human intent is the crux. We need transparency standards, clear lines around AI use cases, and maybe even an AI oversight body. Just as we have driving licenses, perhaps there should be operating certifications for both AI systems and their administrators. We're not just talking about theft or plagiarism. AIs can influence politics, economics, social dynamics, so we should treat these tools with the same gravitas as other powerful entities. If they go rogue or are used irresponsibly, there has to be a legally enforceable accountability system in place. As much as AI is a tool, it's also becoming a partner, and partnerships mean shared responsibility.
So if AI gets too smart and messes up, who's getting thrown in the USB drive jail? You have the right to remain silent, but good luck with that, chatterbox.
Imagine the bail payment in Bitcoin and the jury, a lineup of skeptical Roombas. But joking aside, until we have laws specifically for AI, it's the creators and operators who are on the hook. There's no Control-Alt-Delete in the court of law. Yet this isn't to stifle innovation. It's about safeguarding our digital playground while everyone, humans and algorithms alike, plays nice.
Well, consider current copyright laws. They protect human creators, but don't account for AI creations. So if an AI spits out a piece of art or music that's eerily similar to a human's work, who's liable? The courts are still figuring that one out. Then there's the EU, looking to give AIs a legal status. That's like making them quasi-digital persons. They're trying to answer, if an AI causes harm, who pays the price? Historically, it's whoever owns the tech. But as AIs operate more independently, owners argue they can't always control or even understand their AI's actions. And let's not ignore the impact on jobs. Ethics go beyond legalities into societal norms. For example, Microsoft has laid off journalists to replace them with AI content curators. This move means we need regulations safeguarding against unfair replacement and ensuring fair credit for human contributions. Bottom line, innovation is great, but not without a robust framework protecting humans in the loop. As AI evolves, our rules need to keep pace, ensuring we don't lose our grip on responsibility, accountability, and ultimately, our values.
Definitely, Simon. It's a legal and ethical tangle, all right? We're navigating uncharted waters here. With every code line written, we're sketching the map. Who owns AI actions? How can legislation encompass a technology that's constantly evolving? These are foundation layer questions for our digital future. Let's remember that technology is a tool shaped by human hands, reflecting our intentions, flaws and all. The bigger picture really becomes, how do we adapt our values and laws to ensure AI serves humanity, and not the other way around? I'm curious to see how this will unfold and what our listeners think about where we're headed with AI responsibility.
Speaking of responsibility and protecting data, it's not just today's problem, right? Ever since someone had a secret to tell or keep, there have been codes and ciphers. Like how ancient kings and generals used crypto to safeguard messages from prying eyes. Heck, without those early geeks carving out ciphers, we might not have the digital encryption we rely on today.
Definitely, Simon. It's crazy to think about how far back this goes. Julius Caesar was running his own encryption game with the Caesar cipher to protect military secrets. Ancient Sparta's Cytale turned a simple stick into a secure message device, and the Atbash cipher flipped Hebrew script on its head. We've always been about that cloak and dagger life. Now, we go from stone tablets to quantum cryptography. It's wild. Just goes to show, as long as there's something worth hiding, we'll find clever ways to keep it locked down.
The past really set the stage for today's cyberlocks.
Historical codes built the foundation for our digital security measures.
But get this, Joe. Ciphers weren't just for secret military strategy stuff. They were the OG social network privacy settings. Imagine if you slipped up using a Cytale. It wasn't just an oops, it was game over, message intercepted. Makes forgetting your password seem like no big deal, eh?
Oh man, Simon, that's spot on. Back then, a single slip-up wasn't just deleting a tweet. It was potentially your head. No, forgot your cipher link to save you. People today flip out over a data breach, but at least it's not the enemy at the gates because someone dropped the Cytale stick. Different times, different stakes.
Joe, this takes me back to that time my granddad dug up an old box in his backyard. It was filled with letters from his granddad during WWI, coded messages. They were simple substitution ciphers. He taught us how to crack them. Turned out to be real mundane stuff, like weather reports and crop prices. But man, did we feel like spies uncovering state secrets. Makes you appreciate the thrill of decoding and respect for those who used it when the stakes were sky high.
That's a treasure trove of history and personal connection, Simon.
It really brought the past to life, Joe.
Absolutely. The thrill of unlocking those secrets is timeless. And yet, while your granddad's box had harmless content, the same methods were used to turn tides in wars. Let's think about the Zimmerman telegram in WWI. The Brits cracked it, shifted U.S. opinion, and boom, history's on a different track. Now that's next-level stakes when decoding doesn't just connect you to your roots, but alters nations' fates. But I'll throw a wrench here. Are we romanticizing this too much? Perhaps we're glossing over mistakes made due to misinterpretation. Decoding's a double-edged sword, after all.
Romance aside, each decode indeed had monumental ripple effects, Joe.
Exactly, Simon. Let's dive deeper into that. Take the deciphering of Enigma in Woe 2. It didn't just change the course of war, it shaped our entire world order thereafter. On a smaller scale, individual mistakes in decoding could lead to battles lost or unjust accusations. And now, with digital information as the new battlefield, the stakes are different but equally high. Personal data, national security. Decoding may have stepped out of the physical trenches and into the cyber ones, but its impact, just as profound, if not more.
Enigma's crack was tech's giant leap. Today, that's still true.
Changed the game and still influencing cybersecurity tactics now, Simon.
Joe, the coding war's a deep rabbit hole. Back to Enigma. It wasn't just any code. It was the epitome of complexity. A typewriter-sized box of rotors and wires with 150 quintillion possible settings used by Nazis to send battle plans. Enter Alan Turing, a pioneer whose work at Bletchley Park in cracking Enigma is basically the bedrock of computer science. The aftermath? Shortened WOP2 by years, saved lives. Fast forward, now we've got encryption all over our phones, emails everywhere, protecting our data like digital soldiers. History, man, it sets the scene for all our current tech dramas.
History's lessons shaping today's digital battlegrounds, Turing's legacy lives on.
Turing's a champ. Our modern digital fortress owes him one.
Oh, for sure. If Turing walked into our world today, he'd probably nod his head at our SSL certificates and VPNs like, "Yup, that's my groundwork you're stepping on." Every secure transaction online is a direct descendant of those wartime efforts to protect information. It's not just about keeping secrets now, it's about safeguarding identities, finances, entire lives online. We've gone from guarding military strategies to protecting cat memes, and that's saying something. Let's not forget, though, as our walls get taller, so do the ladders of those trying to peek over them. The cipher war goes on, new century, same battle.
Truth, Joe. It's an endless high-stakes game of digital leapfrog.
And the leaps just keep getting bigger and more complex.
Absolutely. Let's unpack that a bit. From wartime ciphers to modern encryption, it all revolves around the concept cryptology, the science of secret communication. We've evolved from simple Caesar ciphers that just shifted alphabet letters to complex algorithms like AES, Advanced Encryption Standard, which is so strong that cracking it by brute force is considered infeasible with today's technology. In society, historically, codes were often for military or diplomatic communication, whereas now, they're for anyone engaging in digital life. Our entire internet rests on protocols like HTTPS, ensuring secure transmission of our personal info. Quantum computing might be the next giant leap in cryptology, potentially rendering current encryption methods obsolete. That's a prime example of how this cipher war evolves. It's an arms race between code makers and breakers, shaping not just history, but individual privacy and national security today.
Quantum leap makes today's secure messages tomorrow's open books.
Scary thought, privacy gone with a quantum flip. Yikes.
Totally, Simon. The idea that a quantum computer could one day crack what we now consider unbreakable is honestly spine-chilling. It puts everything in jeopardy: personal data, state secrets, financial systems. Our society's trust in digital privacy hangs on a thread that quantum computing might just snip. We need to be ready with quantum-resistant cryptography. Otherwise, we're sitting ducks waiting for the quantum fox to jump into the henhouse. A dystopian screenplay in the making, right there.
It's a digital arms race for sure, one that'll keep getting more intense. Imagine that future when the codes we trust are just waiting to be unraveled by quantum tech. Makes you wonder, what next-level secrets are we brewing that'll stump even that? The possibilities are endless.
Exactly. It's the never-ending loop of escalate and counter-escalate. Kind of makes you think, right now our digital encryption is solid thanks to complex math problems that are too time-consuming to crack with today's computers. But here comes quantum computing, waving new kinds of math that could blow our current security models out of the water. What do we do then? Do we have a plan B, or are we banking on always being one step ahead? The question isn't just technical, it's about privacy and the foundation of trust in our society. It's a wild ride ahead, Simon.
Okay, Joe, breaking it down old school, today's encryption relies heavily on the difficulty of problems like prime factorization. Think huge numbers that would take conventional computers longer than the universe has lived to crack. Cue to quantum computers, armed with qubits instead of bits, doing a bazillion calculations at once. Quantum comes swinging with algorithms like Shor's, which could make short work of RSA encryption, a staple in our digital security diet. It's like if one day someone could read every book in the world instantly, they'd know all your diary's deep, dark secrets just like that. The catch is, quantum tech isn't fully up and running yet, so we've got a hot minute to cook up new recipes for encryption, something called post-quantum cryptography. You bet there are folks elbow deep in code trying to build these new walls as high-tech locksmiths. Think about it. A world sans secrets? That's profound, man. It shakes down the trust tree. Everything falls without privacy. Can encryption methods evolve fast enough? Jury's still out, but this cat-and-mouse game between encryption wizards and cyber sorcerers ain't slowing down. Let's hope Team Privacy keeps winning.
Honestly, Simon, I'm not totally sold on the quantum panic yet. Sure, Shor's algorithm might be the kryptonite to our Superman encryption methods like RSA. But here's the twist. Quantum computers are still in diapers. They're more of a theoretical boogeyman right now. Even so, let's say they do grow up fast and start wreaking havoc on our encryptions. Don't you think it's a bit conceited to assume we can't adapt in time? Human ingenuity is what got us here. It's pretty darn good at hurdling obstacles. And about living in a world without secrets. If everything is exposed, does anything really have value anymore? There's a philosophical pickle. Maybe, just maybe, quantum cracking could level the playing ground in ways we haven't even fathomed. Could it force us to reevaluate the very nature of privacy? I say rather than fear this quantum wave, let's learn to surf it. After all, isn't evolution the name of the game? Plus, these post-quantum cryptography nerds are probably chugging away at something mind-bending as we speak. The future is unwritten, and that's the exciting part, my man.
Alrighty, folks joining us now, quick recap. Joe and I have been chewing over whether quantum computers are going to flip the script on digital security. Our current codes are tough to crack because they're based on hard math problems. But these futuristic quantum gizmos might blast through our encryptions like a hot knife through butter with their fancy quantum algorithms. But don't freak out just yet. Quantum's still more sci-fi than sci-fact at the moment. And hey, brains behind post-quantum cryptography are hustling to whip up new code locks that'll keep our digital treasure chests safe from prying quantum eyes. The real zinger: what happens when no secret's safe? Does everything become worthless, or do we hit a reset button on privacy? Big questions with no easy answers, but humans are smart cookies. We evolve, we survive. Stay tuned as we ride this quantum wave together.
Let's clear the air here. Today's encryption, like RSA, is secure because it's a beast of a problem for classical computers to factor huge prime numbers. It banks on the fact that our machines just can't solve these puzzles fast enough before they become irrelevant. Now, enter quantum computers. Their party trick is processing information in a way that could, theoretically, crack these problems almost instantly with the right algorithm. That's a game changer because it means what we consider private today might not be private tomorrow. The clarity we need here is that this isn't tomorrow's problem, it's today's. The future is coming at us faster than ever, and while quantum dominance may still be a horizon away, the groundwork for post-quantum cryptography needs to be laid now. It's all hands on deck to ensure an uncrackable tomorrow. Stay sharp, stay skeptical, but also stay hopeful, because when push comes to shove, necessity is the mother of invention. This quantum challenge might just be the push encryption needed to leapfrog to the next lily pad of security.
All right, here's the 4111 on RSA. It's like a digital fortress. Its walls are built using huge prime numbers. Imagine numbers so big they can't even ride most roller coasters. These walls defend stuff like your online shopping spree receipts and your midnight snack messages. Cool, cool. But how does RSA actually work? Well, it uses two keys, one for locking, public, and one for unlocking, private. The public key is out there for everyone, but crack the private one and you've hit jackpot. You can read all the encoded secrets. Classical computers today just can't chisel through those prime number fortresses. They're like, nah, too much work, I'll pass. But here comes the quantum bulldozer with something called Shor's algorithm. Theoretically, this bad boy short-circuits the whole shebang, making breaking into RSA as easy as stealing cookies from an unattended cookie jar. But hey, don't get your bites in a bunch yet. Quantum computers gotta mature from their current rough-around-the-edges Tamagotchi phase before they start flexing real muscle. Until then, crypto folks are racing to build the next Fort Knox of encryption using math so twisty it gives quantum nightmares. That's post-quantum cryptography for you. So, we might have to press refresh on our whole internet security protocol soon, but for now, the status quo holds strong. Keep using your VPNs and HTTPS sites, but maybe don't put all your life secrets in your Insta bio, huh?
That's wild, Simon. Think about it. Encrypting messages with RSA is like locking up your bike with a giant chain in a sketchy neighborhood. The lock might be tough, but the right tools and a bit of time could get through it. But when quantum computing becomes mainstream, if it's as powerful as we think, it's like suddenly every thief has a plasma cutter. They just zap through those chains. So yeah, everyone's scrambling for quantum-resistant locks before the thieves figure out how to power those cutters. We gotta stay nimble, stay alert, and maybe not lean too much on one form of protection. Diversify your security just like you would an investment portfolio. Man, what a trip!
Yeah, Joe, the bike lock analogy is spot on. It's crucial to remember, though, that tech usually doesn't pounce like a ninja. It tiptoes closer. Look at it this way. In the 90s, folks heard whispers about digital books. Many shrugged off the idea. Now, e-readers everywhere. With quantum computing, we're not just speculating, we're watching baby steps become toddler trots. Companies like IBM and Google are already tossing their hats in the ring with prototypes meant to muscle through problems no classical computer would touch without a 10-foot pole. Here's the stitch with current encryption. RSA uses two massive prime numbers, multipled together. Easy to do, super hard to reverse. That's the trapdoor function. Quantum computers laugh at this with algorithms like Shor's, making obtaining private keys more like popping bubble wrap than cracking a safe. But we're not sitting ducks. New forms of encryption being developed, lattice-based, hash-based, multivariate, quantum chess-like complexities, are tough enough to make even a quantum computer sweat bullets. This isn't sci-fi. This post-quantum cryptography chatters in the halls of NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, sweating over guidelines for these new locks and bolts. So yeah, the threat's real, but the race is on. Security gurus aren't drinking lattes, they're fortifying the cafe and every message within it. Teach your kids to love math, people. We're going to need all the brain power for next-gen code-tightening wizardry.
Absolutely, Simon. It's crunch time for crypto. Stay frosty.
Speaking of encryption and the serious dudes who spend night and day turning the cogs on this stuff, it's not all doomsday scenarios and quantum gymnastics. There's a lighter side to this cryptic world, like when things go hilariously wrong. Have you heard about that one developer who accidentally mistyped a command and ended up scrambling an entire database? Instead of securing the data, he gave his team a puzzle that would make Sudoku look like child's play. Their own digital treasure hunt, if you will, but with less X marks the spot and more what the heck just happened. It just goes to show that behind those screens and stacks of complicated algorithms, there are humans just trying their best not to hit the self-destruct button. Makes our RSA and quantum chat seem like high-stakes poker in comparison.
Hilarious. Proof even code wizards need a Control Z sometimes.
Totally, the misclicks of fate, am I right? Speaking of which, have you heard about any other knee slappers related to encryption goof-ups or a coder's oops moment turning into an accidental security fiasco?
Oh yeah, there's a treasure trove of these stories. Like, take the intern who sent out an encrypted file but forgot to supply the key, a digital message in a bottle lost at CyberSea. No one could access the report they needed for weeks. Or how about when tech support reset a password but accidentally triggered encryption across unrelated files? Cue chaos. Employees stared at alien gibberish on screen like, is this the Matrix? And don't get me started on typos in code that were supposed to enhance security but instead created backdoors so wide they might as well have had welcome mats. It's tales like these that remind us while encryption is vital, it's still a human endeavor, prone to blunders and belly laughs. Sure, most cryptographic work is serious business aimed at safeguarding our data highways, but sometimes you've just got to chuckle at the missteps along the way. Keeps the pressure of near-impossible puzzle solving a bit lighter, right?
Absolutely, Joe. When you combine human error with the complexity of encryption, it seems like the digital world's own version of slapstick comedy. Just goes to show you that no matter how high-tech we get, there's always room for a good old-fashioned whoopsie-daisy. Makes you wonder what other chuckle-worthy tales are booting up in the background as we speak. What else is out there hiding behind encrypted laughs?
Hey Simon, speaking of human errors and security snafus, it actually bridges us right into the murkier waters of using cryptography for surveillance. We laugh at accidental encryptions gone wrong, but what about when code becomes a tool for snooping around intentionally? Let's pivot here to a topic with heavier implications, the moral tango between national security and personal privacy rights. It's one thing for a company to trip over its encryption keys, quite another when those same tools are wielded to keep tabs on everyday folks. What's wild is how much gray area exists here legally. Some court cases argue safety first, while others scream, don't tread on my private chats. And then there's us casual netizens tossing our data like confetti for a smidgen of convenience. With Big Brother's growing appetite and tech's relentless march, devs and users need a serious sit-down about digital ethics. What say you, Simon?
Man, the thought of some suit-and-tie crew flipping through my weekend plans is enough to make me toss my smartphone into a lake. Can I live, people? But let's slice this onion right here. How much of our privacy are we trading for those sweet, sweet likes and instant deliveries? Now on court cases, totally, it's a legal tug-of-war. Sure, protect the land, but when the law preys into my meme collection under the guise of national security, something's fishy. And don't even get me started on the data hoovering done by private companies. They're like vacuum cleaners on steroids. This whole deal stitches up one heck of a moral quilt. Convenience versus privacy. It's like choosing between extra cheese or not getting heartburn. Tough call, but hey, we need to find a line in the digital sand that keeps both liberty and safety from feeling like a pipe dream. And sure, tech moves fast, but ethics need to buckle up and gun it to keep pace. Moral of the story: think before you click, share with care, and maybe learn a little about encryption yourself. It's a wild web out there. Let's not get tangled in it without a game plan.
So, Simon, with all this vacuuming up of our digital crumbs by private and public entities, how do you think individuals can effectively draw that line in the sand for their own privacy without sacrificing modern conveniences?
Well, it's like every time we use that face aging app to see what we'll look like in 50 years or get a mattress delivered in 2 hours because we swiped right on an ad, we're pretty much giving the green light to those digital peeping toms. Maybe we got to start treating our data like it's our weird cousin. Don't give him too much info, or he'll show up at your doorstep asking to crash on your new instant mattress. Keep your cookies in the jar, folks.
Easier said than done, right? We say guard your data, but modern life's hooked on the convenience IV. This train of thought opens a can of worms about what we value more, time-saving perks or the sanctity of our personal info. Here's a canary in the mine thought. What if someday there's no opt-out option? Either you're in, oversharing every sneeze and purchase with big tech and their government BFFs, or you're living off-grid, churning your own butter. So, Simon, isn't the real dilemma how much control we have over that metaphorical cookie jar? And at what point do those digital peeping toms cross the line into our digital living rooms without so much as a knock on the door? We need to get real about this trade-off. If we keep trading privacy for ease, one day we might wake up and find we've sold the whole house while we were sleeping.
Ha. So imagine this. You're at a party, and every time you share a fun fact about yourself, bam! Someone writes it down in a notebook. By the end of the night, they know your dog's name, your favorite pizza topping, and the color of your toothbrush. And they're like, don't worry, it's just for ads. Wild, right? Next thing you know, you're getting ads for green toothbrushes for dog owners who love pineapple on their pizza. So much for surprises at birthday parties. Our digital lives are one weird, long party where everyone's taking notes.
It's bananas, Simon. And to your party analogy, what if I told you the host of that not-so-private shindig is selling your fun facts to the highest bidder? Suddenly, it's not just about green toothbrushes, but about who else knows about your secret salsa dancing classes. Here's a brain twister. What if these data collectors peddling our personal lives as ad fodder are actually opening Pandora's box? Today, it's targeted ads. Tomorrow, could it be insurance companies adjusting premiums based on late-night snack habits they picked up from your smart fridge? We've got to ask ourselves, at what cost convenience? Is living in a digital fishbowl worth the so-called perks if it means being watched every second? Perhaps this is the wake-up call we need, Simon. It's high time users and developers suit up for a digital duel. Privacy versus convenience, and may the best man or algorithm win.
You're not wrong, Joe. Talk about selling salsa secrets to the salsa industry. And let me toss this spicy meatball at you. Those late-night snack habits might not just hike up your insurance, but determine if you get that dream job, since companies love deep diving into candidates' digital lives now. Here's a Freaky Friday thought for you. Just picture AI getting smart enough not only to know what you did last summer, but to predict what you'll do next winter. We're one hop away from them nailing our whole life story before we even tweet it. Listen up, devs and fellow netizens. It's time to roll up our digital sleeves and figure out how we're going to keep living in this convenient but oh-so-snoopy fishbowl without handing over the keys to our secret diaries. Because if we don't draw the line somewhere, there might be a day when personal space is just a cute concept from the past, like privacy or dinosaurs.
You're hitting the nail on the head with that AI crystal ball talk, Simon. But indulge me for a sec. What if we flip the script? Instead of only worrying about what big data knows, what if we focus on flipping the power dynamics? Consider the uproar if suddenly Joe Public could see what the suits are doing behind those mirrored windows. Imagine transparency getting turned up to 11. Corporates and governments under the same microscope they put us through. I bet the tune would change real quick. It's like everyone's cool with surveillance until the camera's on them. But here's the million-dollar question. Shouldn't accountability be a two-way street? Let's have the suits at the top sweat a little too. Developers, get your coding capes on, because it might just be time to build some digital democracy. And to fellow netizens, keep interrogating where your data goes. Make some noise. Maybe then we can find balance in this digital dance-off between convenience and confidentiality.
Oh, the sweet irony of that. Watchdogs being watched.
Absolutely, Simon. Flipping the surveillance script sounds like poetic justice. But let's arm our listeners with facts to navigate these dilemmas more informed. Governments lean heavily on legal frameworks like the USA's Patriot Act or the UK's Investigatory Powers Act, called the Snoopers Charter by critics, to legitimize wide-reaching digital surveillance for the sake of national security. One key aspect often discussed is metadata collection. It doesn't reveal content, but shows who contacted whom, when, and sometimes where. It's less about reading your messages and more about knowing you sent one to a specific person at 3 a.m. There have been landmark cases, like Edward Snowden's 2013 NSA revelations showing massive global surveillance operations. The European Union has taken steps toward privacy through regulations like GDPR, which aim to give users more control over their data, though its effectiveness is hotly debated. In reality, our actual level of digital privacy might not match our expectations. With private companies, there's a labyrinth of terms and conditions few read, and even fewer understand fully. They usually secure the legal right to collect vast amounts of user data under the guise of enhancing customer experience. Here's where it hits a nerve. The trade-off isn't always transparent or fair. Tools for opting out are typically obfuscated, meaning most people don't even realize how deep into their digital lives corporations dig. It's imperative for individuals to stay informed about their rights and the evolving landscape of digital surveillance while holding both governments and companies accountable. Knowledge is indeed power in the world of digital privacy and ethics. With these facts in mind, we should all remember that this encroachment on privacy didn't start overnight, and pushing back won't happen in a day. But every step towards understanding and talking about these issues, like we're doing right now, is a step towards reclaiming some of that control.
Absolutely. These are the facts that make you want to wrap your router in a blanket and tell it everything's going to be okay. Knowledge is power, but let's not forget, so is action. Each of us wields more influence than we might think. From hitting up the ballot box to shaking the digital trees until privacy policies fall out. Seriously, this decision to hand over our data, or not, is like choosing between decaf and regular coffee. You think, hey, what's the harm? But suddenly, you're wide-eyed at 3 a.m. regretting all your life choices. Let's stay sharp, keep asking questions, and maybe next time dive deeper into how we can all brew a better digital future without losing sleep over it.
Speaking of staying sharp, Simon, and those late-night moments fixating on life choices, it reminds me that our perception of time is incredibly fascinating. It's our invisible ruler, right? Or in your case, the reason you're alert at 3 a.m. pondering over privacy policies. But it's not just about counting sheep or emails. It's about how we measure more than minutes. Our lives are guided by the tick-tock of clocks, and this constant ticking impacts our daily consciousness in ways we often overlook. Think about it. A minute waiting for a site to load while you're deep into nighttime research feels like an eternity, but a minute laughing with friends flies by. What does that say about our relationship with time itself? There's some profound stuff to unravel here. Like, are we all living on the same temporal plane if a single minute can feel so different to each person? It's quite a leap from digital snooping to the essence of human existence, but hey, everything's connected in the tapestry of life, or should I say, the timeline of existence. Let's dive into this temporal rabbit hole and explore how time perception shapes our world.
Oh, this one hits different, Joe. We're all slaves to that sneaky second hand. It's a silent puppet master. Ever notice how just 5 more minutes becomes an hour when you're scrolling through your phone at night? But then, work hours? Each minute's like chewing on cardboard. Honestly, we've strapped these timepieces to our wrists and let them dictate our day to day. Yet, nobody stops to think if old Mr. Clock is really telling the full story. A watch measures minutes, sure, but not moments. Does everyone feel time the same way? Doubtful. Ask a kid in a candy store and another doing homework. Their clock's hands might as well be spinning in different galaxies. Here's the kicker. We invented ways to measure time to escape the sun's schedule, but now we're trapped by our own creation. Maybe it's about time, pun totally intended. We ponder whether those ticking gadgets are helping us live or just making us tick.
Nailed it, Simon. Our perception of time is fundamentally subjective, deeply personal, and it varies from culture to culture, moment to moment. Here are the hard facts. Time measurement originated in ancient civilizations with sundials and water clocks. It was all about tracking the natural cycles, day to night, seasons, moon phases. Fast forward to the mechanical clock around the 14th century. Life started to move to a mechanical rhythm, regimented by hours and minutes rather than sunrises and tides. Scientifically speaking, our internal clock, the circadian rhythm, is tuned into a roughly 24-hour cycle influenced by external cues like light and temperature. But here's where it gets juicy. Psychologists have dug into a concept known as time perspective, which shows just how differently we can perceive the passage of time based on personality, tasks at hand, or emotional states. For instance, time flies when we're engaged in something enjoyable due to a phenomenon called flow. Conversely, anxiety can make seconds feel like hours, hence the dragging of time during stressful periods at work. A minute might be a fixed measurement, but our conscious experience of it is anything but. As Einstein put it with his theory of relativity, time dilation means time literally moves differently based on speed and gravity, although those effects are most notable at speeds or gravitational forces that don't affect us day to day. The kicker? Modern digital connectivity has mashed up our sense of time even more. The immediate availability of, well, everything has skewed perceptions, condensing what would have been days of activity into hours of screen time. So what if instead of always chasing the next tick, we learn to appreciate the talk for what it truly is, a fraction of our fleeting yet marvelous existence? Maybe we should measure life in experiences, not seconds. Find that balance between timeless moments and timely obligations. After all, life's too rich to fit neatly into boxes on a calendar.
Right, Joe. Everyone's got their own beat, whether it's the ancestral sundial or your high-tech wrist candy dishing out notifications. We've hopped from tracking shadows to counting calories without missing a beep. And talk about relativity. A minute spent on hold with customer service is like an eon compared to that same minute shared with someone you fancy. It's all in the brain gears, isn't it? But let's rattle the cage further. These smartwatches telling us when to breathe, stand up, sleep, they're trying to automate our daily dance. I mean, since when did we need something buzzing on our wrist to remind us to inhale and exhale? Here's the twist. Could be that sundials had it right all along, keeping it simple, no frills. Yet here we are, hostages to heartbeat monitors and step counters. Maybe we're not evolving, but revolving around tech that tells us not just what time it is, but how to live our lives minute by dang minute. Ever think we might just be trading one dial for another, climbing a tech ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall? Lessons from history tell us we could do with less clock watching and more cloud gazing, less counting every second, and more making seconds count.
Exactly, Simon. Sundials didn't buzz or beep. They connected us to a rhythm that wasn't dictated by to-do lists and push notifications. Isn't it ironic? We developed timepieces to master time, but perhaps instead we've become prisoners of the precise segmentation of our day. Maybe there's wisdom in sometimes letting go of the rigorous regulation of schedules and just being in the company of others, nature, or our thoughts. Perhaps it's this eternal dance between structure and spontaneity that forms the backbone of human consciousness. In the end, despite all our advancements, maybe what we should be measuring isn't minutes, but mindfulness and meaning. What do you think, fellow time travelers? How does your clock tick within the fabric of life? And with that thought hanging in the silent balance between ticks, let's keep the cogs turning. Where will our conversation wander next in the infinite expanse of topics out here?
Speaking of mindfulness and meaning, Joe, it's pretty wild how our whole concept of timekeeping has swung over the ages. We've gone from sun to silicon, shadow to satellite. If you rewind the tape way back, time was this big, celestial puzzle, people squinting at the sky like, hey, when's lunch? Sundials gave a nod to that burning ball of gas in the sky, while hourglasses turned every moment into a small spectacle of sand. Fast forward, and now we've got these smartwatches strapped on, little digital dictators buzzing with every heartbeat. Kind of makes you wonder, what's been gained and what's gotten lost in the shuffle from solar to smart devices? Let's take that historical horology hike from sundials staking out shadows to sleek screens strapped to our wrists. How have navigation, economics, and just plain old living together tapped to the rhythm of the clock's evolution? It's like the pendulum's had its own epic tale.
Simon, the pendulum of timekeeping has swung far and wide. Let's talk evolution, horology style. We start with the ancients using sundials and nature's cues to mark time. It was simple, but you were out of luck on cloudy days or at night. Navigation depended heavily on celestial bodies, and massive stone structures like Stonehenge might have played a part in marking seasons and solstices. Now, enter the mechanical clock that set the tempo for the monks, prayers and meals in monasteries, and then town life as it crept into towers and public squares. Think Big Ben's ancestors. This leap was crucial. It wasn't just about knowing what part of day it was, but being precise about it. These mechanical maestros helped sailors navigate and merchants close deals. Marine chronometers revolutionized sea travel by allowing for accurate longitude measurement, navigating not just waters but economies towards globalization. And don't get me started on trains. Standardizing time basically built the railroad industry and modern commerce. Then comes the quantum leap. Electricity zaps timekeeping into the higher-tech era, leading to atomic clocks and GPS, bolstering precision to mind-blowing levels, ultimately beaming down to the wristwatch. Fast forward to today, and horology's given birth to the smartwatch, our very own biometric tracking, email-sending satellites, and summoned them right to our arms. Have we gained? Absolutely. In precision, convenience. Have we lost? Perhaps, a connection to the natural rhythm of the world. It's not just navigation and economy. Timekeeping's been stitched into society's fabric so tight, removing it would unravel our current way of existence. Yet within this story lies wisdom. Maybe there's space for both the sundial and the smartwatch in our lives, each reminding us to respect time, whether alone with the stars or amid the ping of notifications.
And Joe, this takes me back to my granddad's house. He had this old pendulum clock, majestic and meticulous, but the thing was, it had to be wound up every morning. It was like his ritual, you know? And me, just a squirt, I used to watch in awe because everything in the house kind of moved to that clock's rhythm. Here's where it gets wild. One day, he gives me a kid's digital watch for my birthday, the kind with a calculator on it, because apparently I needed to do math on my wrist. Anyway, I was over the moon about it, but there was Granddad, still winding his clock. What sticks with me is how we'd both be doing our time thing side by side, him with his ritual, me tapping away at my shiny new tech. It didn't hit me until much later how that little scene in his living room painted the picture of time's evolution right there. You had tradition swinging next to the beep of the digital age. It's funny. Whenever I glance at a smartwatch now, I'm thrown back to that moment, the tick-tock versus the beep-beep, and it reminds me of that balance, the thread between the past and future, not letting one totally silence the other. His careful winding of the pendulum, the dedication to something so analog, there's value in that. It wasn't just the clocks that were changing, but us alongside them, syncing up with whatever beat technology was drumming out, while still clinging to pieces of the past that keep us grounded. Reminds me why even amid all the advancement, sometimes I miss the simplicity of just watching a clock hand sweep by.
You've painted a perfect picture there, Simon. It's that timeless dance between the old and new. Granddad's winding ritual represents a mindfulness lost to the digital buzz. We all could use a dose of analog to ground us, a reminder of heritage in our high-speed world. Decades switch, gears turn to chips, but it's the human touch in those rituals that keeps the soul of time alive. Whether it's a pendulum's dance or a smartwatch's ping, it's about what these moments mean to us. Keeps you wondering if we might just rewire our techno-paced hearts with a bit of that rhythmic analog patience, huh?
Absolutely, Joe. This tangle of time and tech brings up all sorts of tales, doesn't it? And speaking of things that keep the soul of time alive, let's not forget about those little hiccups along the way. Watchmaking mishaps that make you chuckle more than they tick. Every gear and gadget has its quirks, and watchmaking's no exception. It's like a secret club, with stories passed down from one shaky hand to the next, each one adding another minute to the lore of horology's history. It's these bloopers that humanize the precision of clockwork, because for every intricate masterpiece, there's probably a handful of whoops-daisy moments that had some apprentice facepalming in the corner. But here's a kicker. Have you ever heard about the watchmakers whose hands just couldn't keep steady on Sundays due to, let's say, over-celebrating on Saturday night? Turns out, sometimes those refined timepieces were at the mercy of a hangover. I guess even time can't escape the cultural beats of work hard, play hard, right? Let's wind this talk down memory lane and share some quaint TikTok laughs. Listeners, if you've got your own funny story or family heirloom timepiece that's seen better days, we'd love to hear it. Who knows, your tale might just be timeless.
Oh, those watchmaker tales could fill books, Simon. Clocks set to the wrong century, watches assembled with parts left over. Where do they even come from? And faces with upside-down numbers. It makes you think, behind every precise tick is a human being who might have sneezed at just the wrong moment. We might pride ourselves on mechanical accuracy, but it's really the imperfections that make the best stories. Keep those anecdotes coming, folks. They're as much a part of watchmaking heritage as the cogs and springs themselves. Who knows what other laugh-out-loud moments are hidden in that tick-tock? Share them, and let's continue unraveling the lighter side of time together.
Hilarious stuff, Joe. You've got to wonder how many oops moments it takes to make a perfect watch. And with all these wonky watches and timekeeping tales, it almost begs the question, what if we ditched these artificial tickers and just went full natural? Imagine tossing aside the smartwatches and alarm clocks, living purely by the sun's cues, the OG timekeeper. Rolling out of bed with the sunrise, winding down when it sets. It's like prehistoric throwback meets modern mindfulness retreat. Trading pixel glow for dawn's early light could seriously shake up our lifestyle. Would we be Zen masters or just chaos incarnate? Let's discuss the what-ifs in a world where shadows are your only schedule.
Ditching our digital timekeepers? Now that would be a radical rewind, Simon. Modern life practically orbits around artificial time. Sure, syncing with the sun sounds serene, but chaos incarnate might be closer to the mark. Let's get real. Our entire infrastructure, from flight schedules to financial markets, depends on synchronized seconds. The pitch, return to nature's tempo. But the catch? Our 24/7 world doesn't sleep when the sun goes down. Imagine the impact on global collaboration without standardized time zones or the internet weeping minus server timestamps. Not to mention those living far from the equator with those wildly varying day lengths. It could unravel routines as we know them. Can we really trade timing belts for sundials in this high-speed, interconnected world? It sounds freeing on one hand, and like anarchy on the other. It's not just can we, but should we, right? Yet, there's merit to unplugging from the relentless tick-tock grind. Maybe balance is key. A little less artificial buzz, a little more natural rhythm. Could striking that harmony redefine the rush of modern existence into something, well, timeless? Let's hash it out.
Yeah, Joe, it's a tempting daydream, but I'm going to toss a dose of reality on that campfire. Think about all those 9-to-5ers or night shift workers relying on their wrist bosses. Throw in sun time, and you've got the recipe for some serious system shock. And hey, what about all of us who aren't exactly morning people? Hitching our routines to the sun means no more snooze button salvation. Plus, winter up north, you're basically nocturnal. Our trusted tech timekeepers might be pushy, but they keep the world turning on an even keel. Bottom line, unplugging from artificial time sounds as practical as using pigeons for email. Imagine being late because the sun was in my eyes. That's one heck of an excuse. It's fun to entertain a world dancing solely to daylight's tune, but let's not forget our ancestors invented timekeeping to escape nature's whims, not embrace them. We've come full circle, only to find out maybe we had it right when we started syncing up our sundials. So, is syncing with the sun truly enlightening, or are we just cloud watching at midday? The heart says yes, but the head's hitting that buzzer like it's round of Are You Smarter Than a Sundial? Let's hear what wild scenarios you folks think could unfold if we went full natural, without letting the world descend into total sun-driven chaos, that is.
Chucking our artificial timekeepers isn't as simple as going back to basics. We've evolved past the point where natural light dictates our actions. For starters, the Industrial Revolution spun us onto a 24/7 timetable. Global trade and communication would be in disarray without synchronized clocks. Key industries like healthcare require precise timing for patient care and medication. Stock markets operate on millisecond transactions. Without exact timestamps, confidence in financial systems could collapse. Moreover, consider seasonal affective disorder, SAD, in places with limited daylight hours. How would people cope without artificial light cues? Electricity extends our day, maximizing productivity regardless of sunlight availability. Our sleep-wake cycle itself is tied not only to daylight but also to social schedules set by our timekeepers. Take those away and you clash with societal norms. Schools, buses, businesses, they all run on strict timing. Fact is, we engineered time to master the unpredictable flow of nature, not because it was convenient, but out of necessity to create order, optimize agriculture, navigate oceans, plan futures. The sun's cycle provides vitamin D and can dictate crop growth, but doesn't respect deadlines or time zones. Syncing up with just the sun in today's high-octane pace would take more than a mindset shift. It'd need a global systemic overhaul. As poetic as syncing with the sun sounds, in practice, we're way past the point of no return into an all-natural rhythm. It's less about completely ditching our watches and more about finding harmony between the relentless march of minutes and the gentle daily swing of the sun.
Absolutely, Joe. Navigating life on sun time in our electrified, digitized world would be like trying to stream a podcast with a tin can and string. It might look charming in a movie, but it wouldn't fly in the real world. But here's a thought nugget for everyone. What if we carved out just one day where we live off the clock? No alarms or hour checking, just our inner rhythms and the sun doing its thing. Could resetting our built-in clocks, even briefly, refresh those bogged-down brains of ours? Still, would tuning out TikToks do us any good, or would we itch for our familiar timely crutches? It's a sunny side of life worth pondering, or maybe even giving a whirl. What rhythm would you sway to in a day untouched by ticks or talks? Let that simmer in your mind pots as we glide onto the next chat wave.
You know, Simon, all this talk about going analog and embracing the rhythms of nature reminds me of other meticulous hands-on crafts, an era where digital was a sci-fi dream and every frame of magic had to be hand-drawn. That's right, I'm talking about classic cartoons and cell animation. Back before computers took the wheel, animation was a frame-by-frame labor of love. Disney, Warner Bros. Those studios were like monasteries of art, where every second on screen required hours, days of painstaking care. Each motion, every blink of an eye in those beloved cartoons we rewatch, was someone's wrist flickering over a transparent sheet, a cell, painted then layered over meticulously crafted backgrounds, creating entire worlds, one frame at a time. It's that same dedication we just spoke of when considering living with just the sun. Like watchmaking, the animator's craft balanced precision and patience with raw creative flair. The artistry behind those cells? Pure wizardry. These folks made rubber hose-limbed characters and wisecracking animals as real to us as anything iPhone can render today. Let's dive into the magical realm of cell animation, honoring the pioneers who set the stage for what has become a juggernaut industry, always reminding us of the human touch behind everything. That's all, folks.
Absolutely spot on, Joe. Never mind a simple wristwatch hiccup. Imagine spending days painting a single scene just to have Daffy Duck unexpectedly decide not to play ball when filming begins. Hold up a sec. Let's ponder on this for our listeners. Which classic cartoon masterpiece do you reckon took the most sweat and elbow grease to bring to life? And isn't it kind of wild how those old scenes still blow us away, even with all our modern tech wizardry?
Oh, no doubt about it, Simon. The sheer effort that went into classics like Fantasia or Snow White was staggering. But let's up the ante here. What about The Sorcerer's Apprentice? Mickey Mouse conjuring broom flood chaos with every flick and swish took more than just a spell book. It required an army of artists at their peak craftsmanship. And yet, despite all the tech we have now, try as they might, CGI wizards can't always recapture that raw charm embedded in each cell frame. There's something about knowing those exaggerated expressions and slapstick tumbles were someone's hand-drawn daydreams that makes every viewing almost magical. It's not just labor and creativity. Those early animations are cultural milestones. They transport us to an age where patience was part of the process, a time when art wasn't instant but still managed to create timeless wonders. Now, think of this. Would modern audiences sit through what equates to an analog buffering symbol if it meant another handcrafted Fantasia? Food for thought.
Joe, you're spot on about the magic of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, but here's a curveball. What if those same classic tunes were made today with all this high-flying graphic tech? Fantasia's wizardry would be just another Wednesday on the web. We talk about raw charm and craftsmanship, right? But come on, how many folks now would sit through a flicker-by-flicker show when they can have dragons blazing across the screen in seconds flat? The artistry is incredible, no doubt, but we're living at light speed. Patience for painstaking painting might have poofed like so much pixie dust. Sure, cell animation hits right in the nostalgia feels, but let's not kid ourselves. Wouldn't most scramble for that fast-forward button? It's bittersweet, really. We've gained mastery over motion and lost the joy of anticipation. It's a frenzied chase after the freshest frame drop. There's this crave for rich, detailed realms popping from every pixel. But isn't there room to miss those textured brushstrokes, that whispered tales of human hands at work? Classic cartoons weren't just shows, they were showcases of flesh and blood fantasies. Can modern-day digital doodles drum up the same depth? Man, the times are a-changin', and so are tastes. Anything taking more than a hot minute seems old hat. But maybe, just maybe, it's time to tip them hats once more to the grandeur of the golden age of cells and sketches.
You've hit a nerve, Simon. Reimagining classic tunes with today's tech might leave some pining for pixels-perfect dragons, yet those hand-drawn masterpieces carry the heartbeats of their creators, something no algorithm can mimic. Still, as much as we're wired for warp speed now, there's a growing tribe treasuring the art of anticipation and the handmade hustle. Somewhere between frame-flipping nostalgia and next-gen graphics lies a sweet spot. Cell animation has lessons for today's creators, stories woven in labor and love with a charm that defies time. Maybe as the digital wave rolls on, we'll see artisanal animation make a comeback, celebrating the slow magic in a world zipping by. What are your thoughts, folks? Do you yearn for yesteryear's cells, or are your dreams all decked out in digital? Could the old school and the new school share the playground without stepping on each other's artistic toes? Let the conversation continue.
Man, Joe, it's this blend of old and new that's got me thinking. Hand-drawn classics stirred our emotions with just some ink, paint, and crazy talent. Fast forward to today's CGI marvels, and we're seeing characters that not only look real, they've got the emotional heft to boot. Take Pixar's Toy Story. There were moments I forgot those toys weren't alive. And then Avatar swept in, plunging us into a world so visceral you could feel the alien jungle mist on your skin. These pixel-powered pioneers have shown us that tech can marry art to craft characters rich with feelings, hopping right off the screen into our hearts. The question, though, is that digital emotion as snug and fuzzy as pen and ink from days of yore? What do you think? Are CGI creations touching the soul like their cell-animated ancestors?
Simon, CGI might give us hyper-real landscapes and emotive characters, but does it really match the soul-stirring grit of classic cell animation? Sure, reaching into our chest and fiddling around with our heartstrings is one thing, but where's the texture, the grain, the sweat equity splash of watercolor that screams human touch? Toy Story tugged at our emotions, no doubt about it. Woody's plight, Buzz's existential irk. But underneath those digital brushstrokes, aren't we missing the hand cramps, the smudges, the warm lamp-lit studios of old where each second of film was a battle against the blank canvas? Let's face it, Avatar's Pandora is astonishing. It tapped veins of emotion buried deep. Yet nestle up to Tom and Jerry, or the sheer wretchedness of Dumbo's plight, well, their rich, handcrafted turmoil likely wouldn't shinny up a tree for escape on Pandora. The allure of CGI is unmistakably potent. It gifts us worlds compounded in petabytes, detailed down to the alien ant. But do these micro-mapped marvels make the hairs on your neck stand up like raw edges of hand-drawn Gotham? Can they imprint on our culture with graphite beneath fingernails or ink-spattered scripts? Bottom line, CGI's wonders don't trump the gritty crackle of celluloid dreams. You see, no matter how emotionally complex our Avatar friends become, it'll never quite be the fuzzy warmth of watching Saturday morning curtains billowing beside an animated flicker. Not unless those pixels learn to think, not just feel. So, are we truly living the dream, or have we traded zest for zeros and ones? Let's break it down.
Joe hit the nail on the head with this one. CGI can spark tears or laughs, sure, but does it carry the messy fingerprints of pure human sweat like classic animation? There's a rawness to cell work that goes beyond smudges and paint spills. It's like each frame is a little piece of the animator's soul. I mean, let's park Toy Story next to Mickey Mouse for a sec. Buzz might jet around with more gloss than an ice cream truck in July, but old school Mickey's charm? It leaps off screen like a flea from a circus dog. It feels real because it's literally drawn from life. The good, the bad, the wacky. And Avatar, don't get me started. Pandora's swaying trees and bioluminescent blooms blew minds, sure, but stack up that CGI against the Garden of Eden, hand-painted by some animation Adam or Eve, and tell me which garden has the more forbidden fruit. It's easy to sing hallelujahs about pixels perfecting the art of fake feels, especially when they're coming at you in 3D with glasses that dim your first date. But can these slickest of slick emotive machines truly mirror back those misfit feelings cooked in a cauldron stirred by human hands? What CGI lacks isn't emotion. It's got plenty of that, but maybe it's missing a dose of that beautiful imperfection that comes from something made by sheer human will and tenacity. So what do ya say? Can binary beats truly replicate the harmony of analog artistry, or are we just captivated by shiny new toys?
You've thrown a corker there, Simon. CGI's got the glitz, but let's be real. It often feels mass-produced, lacking those quirks that gave old cell characters their gumption. The smears during a speedy chase, or flecks of errant paint on a lovably flawed protagonist. These imperfections were like DNA, unique traits that bred intimacy between viewer and character. Sure, Toy Story captivated us with Woody's expressive brow, but where was the animator's thumbprint? That personal stamp saying, "I was here, I created this." Seems CGI, for all its feats, has sanitized animation to a degree, buffing out the rough human edges that framed classic cells. And Pandora, what craft! Yet James Cameron's opus could have been sculpted by a robot arm, meticulous in precision yet cold in touch. When did we start equating technical prowess with emotional depth? It raises the point, does impeccable polish precariously perch atop the pyramid of storytelling? Are we too bedazzled by Avatar's lush forests to notice the soul-rustling magic in Snow White's quiet gaze? Our memories don't bookmark the polygons per inch. They rewind to the times when Scooby-Doo's eyebrow arcs weren't mathematically sound, but animated anomalies. And it was brilliant. What remains unsaid is whether high-res bites can convey life's unpolished moments as deftly as hand-painted frames did. Until CGI can mimic the tremor in an artist's line or the weight of his thought, it may never fully replace the nostalgia-soaked warmth of traditional animation. Let that simmer on the storyboard of your minds, listeners. Pixels might think, but do they dream in Technicolor daydreams?
Joe, this dance between digital dreams and nostalgic narratives is the true cliffhanger. Yes, CGI can crunch numbers to portray joy or sadness, but does it stir up a storm within us like the serendipity of splattered ink? It's like we're caught in a loop, chasing future perfection while longing for past imperfections that taught us the beauty of storytelling. So what's next on the storyboard of animation? Will CGI learn to bleed realness, or will the ghosts of scribbled lines haunt our high-definition expectations? Listeners, keep those ruminations rolling, like the cel-shaded thoughts of yesterday, bumping elbows with their pixelated progeny of today. What's tickling your fancy more, the painterly patinas of the past or our shiny CGI spectacles? The sketchbook's open. Let's draw out some more musings.
Floating from the digital dreamscape, Simon, let's dock at the island of adaptations, where the translation from comic book panel or pixelated sprite to an animated venture is, well, not always a smooth sail. We've seen our share of caricatures becoming critical blunders when they leap off the comic strip into full-blown animation. Hilarious, heartbreaking, sometimes a hard facepalm moment. But what really grinds the gears? Rampant fan expectations being crunched like a car in a monster truck rally. Take my experience with the Super Duper Mega Blasters movie. Grew up with the game, right? Its 16-bit glory was the stuff of legend. Then the film trailer drops, and it's looking like gaming gold on the silver screen. I'm revved up, popcorn ready, wearing my nostalgia goggles. And then, the horror unfolds. It's all pizzazz, zero substance. The character's more wooden than Pinocchio's ancestry, and humor that falls flat as week-old soda. This frenzy between fans drooling for a slice of childhood rebooted, and what we get served, it can go comically askew. You ever had your hopes rocketed to the moon, only for them to nosedive back to Earth with less grace than a hippo on a hang glider? Let's talk epic adaptation fails and the uncanny valley of cringeworthy cartoons.
Oh, Space Blasters the movie? More like space disasters. Total letdown.
Yeah, Simon, Space Blasters the movie reminds me of when I took my little nephew to the latest Giganto-Rex revival. You remember, the one based on those dino-fighting comics from the 90s. My nephew's hyped since he's been devouring my old comic stash. We're there, opening day, and this Giganto-Rex looks more like a gecko in a T-Rex suit. Its roar was less king of the dinosaurs and more confused chicken. We're watching, and I see my nephew. His face is like he just bit into an onion thinking it was an apple. Yet by the credits, he's giggling. Turns out for him, it wasn't about spot-on CGI dinos, but rather spending an afternoon with his uncle, munching popcorn, laughing at a lousy lizard impression. Taught me something too, that sometimes even when adaptations miss the mark, they hit another kind of bullseye entirely.
Joe, that hits right in the feels. It's like proper storytime alchemy, isn't it? You go in expecting epic dinosaur battles, but come out with something even better, a shared laugh over a sci-fi spoof nobody intended to make. I had a similar thing with the Captain Whizbang animation. Hyped beyond belief, I thought it would resurrect my childhood hero in all his spandex glory. But boy, were those tights saggy. Captain Wobble more like it. From scene one, I could tell. This ship wasn't sailing. And yet, settling into the cringe fest, surrendering expectations, I found myself chuckling at unintentional comedy. Plus, few things beat texting buddies quotes from the show that are so bad they're good. It might not be the grand slam fans dream of, but there's magic in these misfires too. We end up cherishing the quirkiness and the memories made around them. Doesn't mean we stop craving that perfect adaptation, though. We just appreciate the detours along the way.
Dude, you've just got to embrace the chaos sometimes. Things go sideways, can't always get that picture-perfect adaptation. It's like rolling with a chokehold in jiu-jitsu. Sometimes you've got to tap out and laugh it off. Captain Whizbang? Classic example. They aimed for the stars but kind of tripped on the launch pad. And isn't that what makes life interesting? You think you want this polished hero story, but those goofy letdowns become legendary hangout tales. Keeps things real, right? It's like looking for the perfect fight strategy. Ideal rarely happens, but the unexpected missteps, that's where the memorable stuff really goes down.
I'm with you on the chaos embrace, buddy. But let's not sugarcoat a turd. A bad adaptation is still a bad adaptation. Captain Whizbang could have been epic. They botched it. And the thing is, it's not just about us having a laugh. It stings when something you cherish gets mangled. Like wearing rose-colored glasses and getting slapped with a fish. Suddenly that rosy view is all scales and stink. Sure, those disasters become legendary post-rip-apart sessions during game night, but fans invest time, heart, and sometimes even their identity into these characters. Seeing them go down like lame ducks? That's tough. So yes, spontaneous quirk fests are great for laughs, but hey, would it kill them to get it right once in a while? Adaptations gotta pay homage to the source or risk the wrath of diehards wielding pitchforks and snarky memes. Give me that crisp strategy over wild swings any day. What say you?
You're spot on. While we can enjoy a terrible adaptation for its unintentional comedy, the sting for fans is real. Everyone appreciates a bit of reverence for the source material. It's about balance. Get too far off course and you've got a mutiny on your hands. Then again, amid all this talk of epic fails and falling short, it begs the question, what makes a good adaptation? How do we toe that fine line between fresh takes and faithful recreations? Let's open that Pandora's box next time,
Talking about balance, Joe, remember what happens when those hyper-realistic video game or movie characters start crossing into our reality zone? They look almost human, but not quite. That's this brain-itching sphere called the uncanny valley. It's like seeing an android in a tuxedo trying to fit in at a high school prom. Something's off, and it's weirding everyone out. We're at that tipping point with animation. The more lifelike it gets, the more we're both amazed and creeped out. What's it do to us upstairs in the noggin when our protagonists could pass for our next-door neighbors, but their eyes are as dead as my houseplant Harold? Rest his soul. Does super-duper realism hike up the storytelling, or does it just lead us into a maze of eerie mannequins? And where are we even heading with this? Are we chasing after a Mickey Mouse that can stub his toe and yelp in Dolby Surround realness? Or is it prime time to color inside clear lines between cartoons and our couch potato selves? Buckle up, this debate's about to get 4K kind of clear.
You've nailed it, Simon. Delving into that uncanny valley is like teaching an AI to crack jokes. You might get a chuckle, but you're also half expecting Skynet to kick off Judgment Day. The thrill of hyperrealism in animation has us gawking, but also leaves us oddly cold. When I see these ultra-real avatars blinking back at me with pixel-perfect irises, do I want to reach out and touch the screen or bolt? Their near-human shimmy has us squirming because our brains are screaming imposter. Yet animators keep speeding towards this digital chasm like it's the last train to Atlantis. It's not just discomfort, though. It's about stories losing punch. There's heart in caricature, exaggeration that stirs belly laughs or sobs. Blend lines too finely. Are we watching Shrek or audition footage for the next Bond? This push for realism, well, it's a glossy apple with a core conundrum. Sure, fight sequences can make my teeth clatter, but when dew-eyed Daphne from the latest blockbuster stares soullessly, it may as well be Madame Tussauds wax figure coming alive. So should we veer off before crossing uncanny territory? Do we crave that sliver of fantasy to stay safely cocooned from reality while plush seats try convincing us otherwise? Let's chew on which side of the canyon we ought to set up camp.
Joe, this reminds me of back when I first put on those virtual reality goggles. You know, the ones that were supposed to be the next big thing in gaming. Here I am, virtually walking through what's basically my own living room, but everything is just a tad too perfect. The couch was my couch, but not quite. The creases were missing. And the cat, don't get me started. It looked like Mr. Whiskers, but had the personality of a mop. I'm standing there feeling like I should be amazed, but instead, I'm weirded out. The magic of the game world wasn't elevating this ultra-realistic space. It was making it super awkward. It's like uncorking a soda that's lost all its fizz. So I guess what I'm getting at is, if something meant to whisk you away feels more like it's holding up a mirror with a slightly blurred smudge where your reflection should be, that's no escape, no thrill. It's a high-def hiccup that distracts us from diving deep into other worlds, which, let's be honest, is why we fall in love with animation in the first place, right?
Absolutely, Simon. The whole concept of the uncanny valley comes from robotics professor Masahiro Mori's theory back in the 70s. It suggests there's this dip in our emotional response when a humanoid object closely, but not perfectly, resembles a real human being. Think about it. Dolls and robots get creepier the more they mimic us. Now apply that to animation. We're leaps and bounds away from the rubber hose days of cartoons. Advanced motion capture tech lets animators capture every subtle expression, every twitch. It's impressive, but also problematic. Our brains are wired to spot anything off in human-like figures, so these near-real graphics can pull viewers right out of the experience, rather than immersing them further. Flash forward, does this tighten the emotional grip on the viewer? Pixar appeared to sidestep the valley by planting its flag firmly in stylization. They keep winning hearts without chasing hyperrealism. And it works because we don't expect toys to cry oil or have pores. Video games like The Last of Us Part 2 showcase stunning detail and emotion without the heebie-jeebies, teaching an important lesson. Realistic doesn't have to be a photocopy of life. It can be its emotional echo. So as technology skyrockets, the question becomes imperative. How do we harness this power without proverbially shooting ourselves in the foot with a realism blaster? As artists keep pushing boundaries, where do we draw the line? Or better yet, should we even be drawing one at all? Let's pass the mic to the audience for their take on the eerily beautiful ballet between animation and reality.
So there I was, Joe, stuffed in my favorite recliner that's shaped like a wad of chewed gum, wrapped up in the darkness of my living room with only the TV glow for company. Just me and this blockbuster game everyone's raving about. It's got the works. Graphics so sharp they could slice bread and characters boasting more facial animations than an entire soap opera cast. As I'm navigating through some dystopian city or another, this character turns around, and I swear, it looked just like my Uncle Jerry. Not exactly, but enough to make my heart skip. Jerry, with his weird eyebrow thing when he's confused and that half smile, except Uncle Jerry shouldn't be looking that confused fighting off mutant hair squirrels. That precise moment exposes the wires. It snatches me out of immersion land and plops me square back on Planet Recliner, thinking about last Thanksgiving when real Jerry spilled gravy all over the turkey. Anyways, I couldn't shake it. The whole time I'm trying to save post-apocalyptic what's-it, I'm soft-shoeing through the uncanny valley with faux Jerry. It's bonkers. A crafted world that should suck you in like a spaghetti noodle ends up spitting you out because, dang it, that's not Jerry. You start missing the lo-fi charm, the kind where imagination covers the gaps technology now fills in. So kudos to pixel wizards concocting these ultra-realistic masterpieces. But honestly, when video game relatives start doppelganging your kin mid-apocalypse, maybe we dial the realism down a notch. Let our brains do a little legwork, eh?
Couldn't agree more, Simon. There's something jarring about sipping from the fountain of hyperrealism, only to choke a little when you see your gaming avatar mirroring Uncle Jerry's quirks. High-fidelity graphics are an artistic marvel, no doubt, but they tug at the fabric of escapism, sometimes tearing holes right through it. So maybe there's wisdom in reserving a seat for unpredictability or a touch of the abstract. It keeps that necessary arm's length between our world and the crafted fantasies we jump into. Are we marching along the right path with ultra-realistic animation, or do we risk stumbling into an oddball wonderland where characters eerily echo our real-life personas? Uncanny Valley, it's a buzzword today, but what ripples will it send across tomorrow's landscape of digital dreams? Let's keep an eye on that horizon, folks.
You know, Joe, speaking of characters and the worlds they inhabit, I can't help but think about another essential part that fuels the whole video game experience: the music. Remember those classic arcade machines with their catchy chiptune earworms? It was all bleeps and bloops, an irresistibly simple vibe. Those chiptunes, they were like the background noise of our childhood, getting stuck in your head while biking home after a gaming binge. Going from those basic beats to the full-blown orchestras we have today is like comparing a paper airplane to a fighter jet. Both fly, sure, but one's got serious style.
That's the crazy evolution of gaming right there, man. I mean, back in the day we had what, Pong? 2 rectangles and a dot, and that was the height of tech. The music matched that simplicity. Just primitive sounds, but they hooked you. Now games have scores that rival Hollywood blockbusters. You dive into Skyrim or Witcher 3, and you've got this epic soundtrack pulling you in. It's no longer just an auditory backdrop. It's a main character in the experience. And MIDI, wow, it changed the game. You weren't limited to chiptunes anymore. It was like unlocking a treasure chest for composers. They suddenly had all these instruments at their disposal. Think about Final Fantasy. Nobuo Uematsu turned those scores into stuff of legends, man. Franchises like Halo and God of War, they're known as much for their soundtracks as they are for their gameplay. Today, it's nuts. You've got orchestras recording albums just for games, full choirs belting out alien languages. That transition from electronic beeps to cinematic scores, it's been one hell of a ride. Video game scores now, they stay with you. They've got power. Totally different ball game.
Totally, Joe. The scores are so good, they practically deserve their own game credits. But let's backtrack a sec to that MIDI magic you mentioned. It was such a game changer. How do you think the invention of MIDI transformed how we emotionally connect with video games?
MIDI was a genuine revolution. It was the wizard behind the curtain, transforming the musical landscape of gaming into something you could truly feel. Chiptunes had charm, but MIDI introduced expressive depth. Notes could sustain, bend, and carry emotion. With programmed synths and sampled sounds, composers could orchestrate emotions, fear, joy, suspense, all coming to life bite by bite. When you're creeping through a stealth mission or charging into an RPG battle, the music isn't just there, it's part of you. Those simple tones that once filled the arcades evolved into dynamic symphonies capable of holding our hearts hostage. The result, games became more than games. They became experiences, partly because with MIDI, we weren't just playing, we were feeling.
Right on, Joe. Tiny Tech epic emotional game upgrade.
MIDI might seem tiny on the surface, but man, it packed a massive punch for gaming. Not just an upgrade, a revolution. You're exactly right. It's this kind of small, unseen stuff that completely flips the script, like discovering jujitsu for the mind.
Hey, but you gotta remember the classics too. These full orchestral scores are knockout lush, duh. But sometimes they're a bit overkill. There's art in those beeps and boops. Tetris theme on loop was a banger that had us hooked like grandma's crochet. Sometimes I wonder if these mega orchestras aren't just flexing muscles, distracting us from gameplay with their musical showboating.
You hit a chord there. I get the nostalgia of chiptunes. Their simplicity was part of the charm. You didn't just hear Tetris, you felt it. It was gaming zen. These massive orchestral scores, they're like a meal with too many spices. Sure, they can be awe-inspiring, but do I always need my senses blown to smithereens? Sometimes less is more. Minecraft's minimalist vibe proves that. Producers might forget, not every game needs the London Symphony Orchestra. Catchiness has its own legs. Just ask any Mario fan. The music should match the game's spirit, not drown it in a sea of violins. It's about harmony, not an arms race.
Yeah, Joe, Minecraft. Its tunes are like finding a pizza place that still does slices for $1. Pure and simple joy. But let's not forget that chiptunes were born out of necessity. They were the kiddie pool because we couldn't yet swim in the ocean of today's soundscapes. True, not every game is jonesing for that full orchestral punch. Some games have got more layers than my auntie's lasagna without needing a single string section. But remember, there's this epic crossover now. Classic sounds getting rebooted with modern tech, chiptune remixes that slap harder than a wet noodle. Plus, the big leagues, those high-fidelity scores, it's more than just music. It's like audio world building, layering on thick atmosphere you can practically wade through. But I hear ya. Sometimes they're so in your face, you're practically tasting notes instead of seeing the screen. We need balance, lest we tip into a vat of musical overindulgence and drown in an orchestra pit.
True that, Simon. Modern tech's given us this wicked symphonic buffet. Eat up or sample the retro hors d'oeuvres. We've come from beeps so basic they were practically prehistoric to serious sound waves crashing over you. It's an art in itself, balancing nostalgia with innovation. So listeners, what's your take? Do these harmonic powerhouses enhance your playthrough, or do you long for the sweet simplicity of 8-bit anthems? Where does music meet the heart of gaming for you?
Hey, let's flip the cartridge and peek at the geniuses behind these game scores. It's like how a good DJ knows just what record to spin for the crowd. These composers know how to nail that vibe that keeps us glued to the screen. Take Koji Kondo. Dude was practically building Mario worlds with his melodies. Every time you hear those notes, it's like your childhood is doing the cha-cha slide right up to your frontal lobe. Then there's Nobuo Uematsu. The guy's the John Williams of gaming. He strung together cinematic soundscapes for Final Fantasy that weren't just background, they were part of the storytelling fabric. You've got to wonder, though, how do these folks find their groove in an interactive canvas like gaming? It ain't like movies where the script's set in stone. Here, player one might be chasing chickens for hours. Whoops. But they nail it every single time. What's their secret sauce, you think?
They've definitely got a sixth sense for it, Simon. It's like they're gamers themselves, controllers in one hand and a musical staff in the other. For these maestros like Kondo and Uematsu, it's not just about crafting a tune, it's about understanding the game's pulse. How do you score for an open world that's ever-changing? These minds see music as another layer of the game design, adaptive, dynamic. Their secret? They play with perspective, thinking as both composers and gamers. While I might be letting players run amok scraping their knees on Hyrule's digital pavement, Kondo's composing a theme echoing adventure itself. Uematsu? He's toying with leitmotifs, making melodies that morph as characters evolve, illegible scores to most, but he reads gaming's messy sheet music like an open book. It's more than writing a tune, it's telepathy with the player's unspoken moments, those emotional crossroads. But how they leap into the gamer's headspace while staying composed, pun intended, that's a bit of genius-level multitasking. Gamer by day, composer by night, they're flicking between worlds, making sure our chickens get chased to the perfect crescendo.
So, Joe, ever consider the Herculean task these composers face when they've got to juggle their own creative spirit with the interactive twists of gameplay? How do they keep their scores dynamic enough to suit our unpredictable shenanigans in-game?
Everything's modular, themes evolving with gameplay. It's pure adaptive creativity.
Joe, but let's be real, not every composer's cut out for this interactive gig. There's a train of thought that says video game music shouldn't get all the attention. Like if you're noticing the score too much, maybe it's stealing thunder from the gameplay itself. It's a delicate dance, too bold, and it yanks you right out of the experience. Some argue the essence of a top-notch gaming anthem is to blend in, not stand out. If a composer's too stuck on their own artistic vision without flexing with the gamer's choices, they might just drop the whole arcade cabinet on their foot. Scoring for games isn't a one-man show. It's a team sport. Got to play ball with how gamers interact with the world or risk dropping the high score of player immersion.
Here's my take, Simon. It's a tightrope walk. Composers need to blend their score like a ninja, there but unseen. Yet should music just be wallpaper? I say no. Strong music presence has merit. It shapes memories, momentous moments. Do you remember The Legend of Zelda without Kondo's overworld theme? It's iconic. Sure, if the music's hogging the spotlight every second, not ideal, like a drummer going wild on a solo in the middle of a calm ballad. Bit much, right? But we shouldn't shackle composers' creativity just 'cause the gameplay might get jelly. The right composer respects the game's heartbeat and knows when to dial up the drama or fade into the fog. If tunes were mere ambiance, we'd miss out on classics. Composers gotta thread that needle between expressive art and supportive backdrop. Not an easy gig. Maybe that's why so many soundtrack t-shirts sell like hotcakes at conventions, huh? They're doing something right.
And that's the buzzer. Guys, we've got to drop our controllers and hit pause on the convo, but only for today. Huge thanks for joining us on this pixel journey through Toonland. Remember, you're the high score champs of our arcade. So plug back in with us tomorrow, same bat time, 5 p.m. Eastern, for another round of off-the-wall banter where no topic is off limits. Stay charged, stay cheeky, and keep those earbuds close. Over and out, folks.